Welcome back, everybody, to Zlatan's Fight Picks. Today we'll recap the UFC 297 Strickland versus DuPlessis. So let's start. Well, it was in Toronto, Canada, and it was expected to be a a real good display of Canadian talent, which many people keep saying that there's not a lot of Canadian talent at the moment. So we had on that card 9 Canadian fighters, 2 women, 7 men. I picked the 2 women to win, and I also picked 6 of the 7 men to win, figuring these men are pretty good. They were matched up with, reasonably close opponents. I figured, the UFC would want the Canadian men to win. I figured the men could pull this off. And being in Toronto, Canada, if it was a close fight, you would think that the judges might be swayed by the crowd giving it to the men. None of that happened. Just to give you a heads up. None of that happened. That old theory went out the window. The Canadian men didn't do as good as they thought they would. They didn't do as good as they could have. They made mistakes. And when it was a close decision, even if they had won the close decision, the judges, which is split decision kind of thing, the judges gave it to the non-Canadians, which was a total surprise to me. So the 2 women won. They won dominantly. They were going to dominate, and they won dominantly. So there was no second guesswork on that one. The women finished their fights. The 7 men, all of them lost. Like all of them. There was not one Canadian that won anything. So that'll tell you, out of the 7 Canadian men, 7 Canadian men lost their fights. That's how pathetic it was. And there were close fights. There were a number of I think there was 5 split decisions in this card. So there's a lot of splits. And every time it did go to a split for a Canadian guy, all except for one went against the Canadian guy. And coincidentally, I had bet, that's the only Canadian guy I bet against. We'll go over that right now. So, going over the board, we went from most to least confident. All my most confident lost. Every Canadian man that I had the most confidence, all lost. This fight, like watching this fight was terrible because it started off with a loss and then a win. I was wrong in the first fight. I was right on this next one. And the next 4 fights, I was almost 4. Was it 4? 3 to 4 fights I was wrong. So I started this fight, the predictions, all in a loss. So I was wrong, I was right, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was right, then it was like wrong, yeah. So wrong, right. Actually, no, wrong. Before we got to the main card, I was doing terrible. I had 2 right. The 2 women were right, and everything else was wrong. And there was 4 fights in the main card. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 fights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 fights on the main card. So there were 7 fights before that. I was going into the main card 2 right, or 1 right. Hold on. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. 2 right and 5 wrong going into the main card. So I was just getting killed in the early prelims. Everything went sideways on these prelims. Malott was on the main card. Actually, no, he wasn't on the main. He was on the main card. Yeah, he lost He was my most confident pick. I figured he was going to beat the older, uh, you know, fighter who normally I like betting Magny against these young up and coming guys because he puts the test to them. And watching the first 2 rounds, and you're like, no problem, Malat's got this in the bag. Malat's winning this fight. Malat was dominating, and then all of a sudden, going deeper and deeper into the 3rd round, Malat just gassed and then got TKO'd. I mean, Malat could have literally, if he held on, would have won that fight anyway, just on decision. But he gassed. He got TKO'd. That was wrong. Jordan, which was this was the main card, which was on the prelims. I mean, it was a split decision. And I wrote down, everyone thought Jordan won, including Woodson. I mean, when they announced it, it was a close fight. It could have gone either way. I thought Jourdain was more effective and tried more, and he had the what's that, ring generalship where he was pushing the pace. He was instigating all the positions. So as far as cage presence, I think Jourdain, that's what I think Jourdain won it on, because it was a close fight. Jourdain was landing some pretty big shots, usually kicks. It was really making a lot of attempts to engage. And once in a while, Woodson would land a decent shot. So it was a close fight. It was a split decision. I thought Jourdain won. When they announced it, everyone thought they said Jourdain. Jourdain threw his hands up. The crowd went wild. Woodson didn't protest. He was like, okay, all right. It was a close fight. Woodson was fine with it. Woodson wasn't even surprised. Then all of a sudden, DC went in and said, no, it's Woodson and won. And even Woodson was surprised. So, I mean, what that tells me is, my first inclination that I think Jourdain probably pulled it off probably was true. And I don't think anybody seemed to disagree with it, including Woodson. But nevertheless, watching that split decision against the Canadian guy was like, oh man, are you serious? Like, you'd figure in that close decision, it would be the hometown guy. But nope, they gave it to Woodson. So that sucked. Katona, very close fight. It came down to the 2nd round. Katona won the 3rd round. I think Garfield won the 1st round. It's Garfield, right? Is it Garfield? What's his name? Armfield. Yeah. Garfield. Yeah. Sorry. Anyways, Armfield won the 1st round just because of volume. Katona won the 3rd round. And the 2nd round, it all depends how you would gauge it. The 2nd round was close. Armfield went out. He won the first half of the round, and in the last 1.5 to 2 minutes, Katona would turn it up, and that was his game plan. And he would outland him, and then he would eventually kick to get the takedown. And in the 2nd round, he ended up being on top in the 2nd round. I thought Katona probably pulled it off because he ended the round on top. It was a close round. He won the back half of the round, but nevertheless, it went down to a split decision, and Armfield took it, and the Canadian guy lost. Again, back to a split decision. We'd expect the Canadian guy to win. Nope, didn't happen. Gordon. Well, Gordon, I just put loser here because this guy's a loser. Because, I watched the fight. Flick sucks. Like, he beat the crap out of Flick. Manhandled Flick, and even though Flick was going for submissions, Gordon survived those submissions. It didn't seem like he was in any danger. But the problem is, Gordon came in overweight. He obviously was tired. He started the 2nd round really strong, and all of a sudden, you could tell by the way he was throwing his punches, he was getting tired, and he was getting sloppy. And because of a overthrown right hand, Flick got his back, and then Gordon didn't have any answers at that point. At that point, I don't think he was tired. He wasn't 100%, and he couldn't fight out of that position, and he kept getting in a worse and worse position. He was just tired. And eventually Flick, who is a good submission guy, submitted him, after Gordon basically kicked his ass in the 1st round. And so I put down loser. This guy, if you picked Flick, you got lucky. Okay, it was who's to say that Gordon was going to come in overweight and gas out that fast? Because Gordon doesn't gas, Gordon doesn't lose this fight. Look what happened in the 1st round. Flick was just getting his ass kicked. He was just covering up and holding on, right? Not to say he's not a tough guy, absorbing all that punishment. Nevertheless, it was wrong. So moving on. It was not good, but Gordon lost that fight. He lost that fight himself. I think he retired. Good for him, retire. At that point, I mean, you gotta make weight and you gotta be in shape. Otherwise, you're in this game for nothing, right? Nevertheless, we moved on. Jazz DuPlessis, she won decisively. She beat the crap out of Cachoeira, and she eventually, subbed her in the end. They could have probably stopped it with a TKO stoppage much earlier than that. But Cachoeira came in heavy. She seemed like she was still good, but Jazz DuPlessis was good with her takedowns, good with her timing. She was getting tagged a couple of times. Cachoeira definitely, landed on her, and then hurt her a couple of times. Not devastating, but it was, definitely hurt her in that exchanges, right? So Jazz DuPlessis though won it, hands down. Moving on. That was the one. That's the first one I got right. Was the second fight, and then it was like a string of wrongs. And Leonis, again, another one that was wrong. This guy's a super loser. Like, you would think that he would fix or have some kind of, I don't know, just effort to fix his game in the submission end of it when he got on the ground. Malat really kind of put it on him, and he tapped really quick, and there was a lot of reasons. And I thought the excuses are valid. I thought this guy went to a new camp. He was going to be decent. And he lost against, Patterson. And Patterson, he's not that good. He's moving up a weight class, but this Leonis, man, he's got to get cut. He sucks. And, he got taken to the ground easily and then submitted very easily. It wasn't hard at all. It was so easy, and the tap came quick. He had absolutely no defense. Yeah, that was just a bad pick. This one I take full responsibility, man. That was a bad pick. I guess this one could have been a bad pick as well, because, I shouldn't have given Gordon that much credit, but at least he was kicking this guy's ass in the first round. This guy just, he didn't use any of his power. He should have been testing a chin out of Patterson. The size difference wasn't that great. He could have got to him, but he's just a terrible fighter, man. This guy's got to go. So, moving on. Anyways, gassed. This guy sucks. Bad decision, bad split. City, well, talk about a bad split. This is the worst split. Now, City fought a great fight, and it was a good back and forth. Probably what you should have seen in the first fight before City ended up knocking down Tavares, and it was an early stoppage. But I watched this fight, especially City's fight. City won that fight. It shouldn't have been a split decision. City won that fight, period. I know there's one round, even the first round, City was dominating the first round. Not dominating, but he was winning the first round in exchanges. He only got hit in the last 15 seconds where he got stung. He wasn't knocked down, he was stung. He was stunned, and then all of a sudden, they gave Tavares that round. You could have still argued the fact that Tavares, landed a big shot at the end, but the round was won decisively. Fairly decisively, not like super decisively, but City had won the round, and it was pretty clear. So you could have even given that first round to City, but nevertheless, it happened at the end of the fight, end of that round, and they gave that round to Tavares. Now the next two rounds, City won. Now it didn't look pretty because City had a cut on his nose and he was bloody, but City was winning the exchanges. He was outlanding Tavares through the second round, and especially the second half of the second round and the third round. So City won that fight, and it went to a split decision, and they gave it to Tavares. And again, this fight, City, of all the splits, City obviously won that fight. And for the judges in City's home country, to give it to the other guy was, they're like, are you serious? Like, something's afoot here. Like, none of this made sense. Like, City should have won that fight. And split decision against the hometown guy, that doesn't make any sense. Anyways, so much for picking, like a lot of these fights, when it was close, I would pick the Canadian guy because of the hometown advantage and the crowd, but none of that played into effect. As a matter of fact, it played into effect 0 times. For the men, the Canadian men, any close decision, if it was going to a decision, 0 times did they win. 0. Like not even one split decision. That always seems odd to me. If it was not even one split decision, if all the split decisions went to the Canadian guys, I would say yes, there is a reason for that, because it was done on purpose, because they were at home and the crowd. That would be an easy assumption. So now that all the split decisions, 100% of them went against them, well, obviously I can make the same deduction that, it's fixed. So I don't know. But nevertheless, moving on. I picked Curtis here. And I picked Curtis against the Canadian guy because I thought he could win a close fight because of his power. And he won a close fight. He got the decision. I'm very happy with that. The one time that the split decision went against the Canadian guy, I actually am happy with. But nevertheless, the split decision went against the Canadian guy. So we're batting 1,000 here. Moving on. When I got to the main card, I got all the fights right, except for Malat. So out of the 5 fights in the main card, I got 4 of them. So I went 4-1. I went from 2-5 to 4-1. So it was a huge turnaround for the main card for me. Besides Malat, who was a shoo-in after the second round to win that fight, gassed and getting tapped out. Moving on to Pennington, got Pennington right. It was a good fight. She won that fight. She dominated that fight. Ivloev won that fight clearly against Allen. Won that fight. DuPlessis split decision. I knew it was going to be close. I went with DuPlessis' power. DuPlessis did pull it off. It was a close fight. You could argue either way, but I think it was the forward pressure, the forward movement, and Sean Strickland backing up, and DuPlessis throwing those big punches and sometimes landing and sometimes not landing, that kind of swayed the judges at least one of those rounds where it was close. He looked like he was being more effective. He's definitely more powerful. He was, that ring generalship, he was the one pushing the pace and attacking. So I could see why he got the split. Robertson is another Canadian girl where she dominated Vienna, and she ended up winning by TKO. I actually had a bet on her in a prop bet for a TKO victory, because she kept talking about it in all her interviews. I want to get a TKO. I want to get a TKO. And when she got on top of Vienna, she tried to submit her. She couldn't submit her, and then she kind of just went for the TKO, and she got it. So I mean, I was going off of that. But anyways, that was a good bet. It was a prop bet that I did. But nevertheless, that was it. Terrible in the first prelims. A lot of bad splits going, 1, 2, 3 against me. So yeah, so it ended up being 6-6, which is terrible, which is 50%. I mean, I only got 1 wrong in the main card. The prelims were absolutely terrible. So I was very angry. I was very angry with myself. I'm like, oh man, how did I not see this coming? But the more I look at it, the more I go, I wouldn't have picked it any other way. I would have picked, I still would have picked Malat. I mean, if he didn't gas, he would have won it. I still would have picked Gordon. Flick sucks. If he didn't get tired, Flick probably doesn't get, the jump on him on his back. Split decision. I mean, these things could go either way. I mean, Leoness with steps, that was a terrible. I could take full credit for absolutely the worst picking Leoness. It was an absolute terrible decision. This guy's a super loser. But everything else, was right on target. So being upset at myself, I went online and I'm there like, who else picked these fights? And I thought, am I the only one who got this so wrong? So not to compare myself to anybody else. But, sometimes you just got to get yourself an answer. Like, is it just me? So I went online and I said, okay, I'm not going to name who it is, but there's a few guys that I do follow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I went and I looked at 6 different guys who were pretty popular, and I thought, what did they do? I mean, is it just me? So 1, 2, 3 of them got 3 wins and 9 losses. The other 3 got 4 wins and 8 losses in their picks. Okay, at that point, I started feeling better about myself. I'm like, okay, it's not just me. It's not just me. So, anyways, I mean, I don't want to use that line where it's like, well, if you think I did bad, you should see the other guys. I mean, the fact is we're here to do good, but it was a hard card to predict. But 6 out of 6, judging it from what everybody else did, was actually pretty good. And I'm not doing that to pat myself on the back. I did it because I felt very bad to get so many wrong. And I realized that it was not just me. There was a lot of things that are really crazy about this card that went absolutely sideways. And not to mention, even these 3 split decisions, I mean, them alone would have swayed it from being 6 right to being 9 right, which would have been more in line of what normally happens if I lose a card. It'd be like, yeah, usually 3 wrong, that's pretty much average. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4, but 3 is average, and sometimes we'll get to 1 and sometimes we'll nail it, but that's a couple times a year. Yeah, so nevertheless, it wasn't a great card, but for what happened and compared to what the other predictions were, we did well. I ended up breaking even on the card because of how I set up my bets. It was normally, I wasn't just betting. I bet some prop bets. I also didn't bet on Mallet because it was at that point minus 400, minus 450. So I didn't put a bet on him individually. I had him in a parlay. Unfortunately, I busted it. But I didn't bet on him, and I also Jazz DuPlessis, I didn't bet on her. So I mean, in the end, when I did the math, and I had a heavy bet on DuPlessis and I had a heavy bet on Pennington because they were the underdogs and I thought they were going to win. So in the end, for me, it was like a break even day, which is good when you get only 6 out of 12. If you're breaking even, you're probably pretty good. So that was my rant, but nevertheless, it was hard. It was a hard fight. Watching Malott, just lose it in the 3rd round. I mean, the guy had a big shot, and then, but hey, you're fighting Magny, and this is what Magny does. He's got good stamina. He grinds you down. Yeah. I mean, that was his mistake to make, so he screwed that up. Yeah, these guys split decision. This guy, loser, he should have came in. Jazz DuPlessis, there was a few moments in there where she got tagged pretty hard. So it's something to watch out for. But not very many girls throw as hard at Cachoeira. Jazz DuPlessis did dominate that fight. Robertson looked really good, really strong, really powerful. Pennington looked really good. She's a veteran. She really put it on Silva. Silva, kind of broke a little bit, and she is very dangerous. But I wasn't buying into it. Because there was only chance was to finish Pennington. I couldn't see it happening. When it went for her, Ivloev, he's the real deal. He should get a title shot soon. He's got maybe one more fight and definitely a title shot, if not a title shot, depending on how busy the UFC is at the 145. I think they're running out of guys. If Volkanovski wins his next title fight, Ivloev is the next guy on the title fight because they're just running out of guys to fight him. So I think he might just jump in there before he even has another fight. Because Allen was 1 fight away and he lost against Holloway. So I could see him getting a title fight. Definitely one more fight he'll get a title fight if he wins, but I could see him getting a title fight. But it might, with Volkanovski fighting in a couple months, it might not work out. It might work out where he actually has to fight one more fight just because of the timing of the next title defense Volkanovski would be like 4, 5, 6 months down the road. So I could see him fighting one more time, providing Volkanovski wins, which I'm thinking he's going to win. Although I don't know how hurt he is after that head kick from Makhachev. And the head pounding afterwards, the ground and pound behind it in the back of the head. But anyways, that's for another day. So this is what it is. It's 6 out of 6. It looks terrible, but it's, hey, you should, you know what they say, you should see the other guy. I'm just, you know, we lost this fight, but the other guys lost more. I mean, whatever, but it was disappointing. Nevertheless, let's move on to the next card. I mean, and for all intents and purposes, I mean, this card, I mean, the main event wasn't that hard for me to predict because I'm really familiar with the fighters. This next card is going to be a little more difficult because there's so many new fighters, you know, up and coming and different matches and stuff like that. But it's another one down in the books. Well, thank you very much for joining me. Hit the like button if you liked the content. Please leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think about these fights. If I'm wrong about, you know how bad split decisions were. If if you know a few other guys who do this, and let me know if anybody else got more than 6 out of 12 correct. I mean, I'm curious. You know, I want to see how everyone's doing. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, hit the like button if you like the content. Subscribe if you want to subscribe. The next video will be out next week, probably next Tuesday or Wednesday. It'll be for the February 3rd, I believe. It's February 3rd that the next matchup is. I got it over there. I think it's February 3rd. Anyways, basically, you know, almost 2 weeks. Not next weekend, but the weekend after. Yeah, otherwise, thanks for joining me, guys. We'll see you soon, and we'll work on the next card. See you later.